Unlock it now. Darius's voice cut through the chaos as a young woman gasped for air, her lips turning blue. The store manager blocked his way. Rules said only he could open the cabinet. 30 seconds later, Darius smashed the lock and saved her life. The next morning, he was fired for breaking it. 3 days later, the company called him back because someone else's child stopped breathing. If you believe rules should never come before a life, type one word below: humanity. 4:45 p.m. Brightmart was nearly empty, the soft hum of ceiling fans blending with faint background music. Darius Cole moved slowly down the aisle, eyes sweeping over shelves, lined so perfectly, it was as if someone had measured them with a ruler. The radio on his shoulder felt heavy, silent. At the service counter, a shiny first aid cabinet sat against the wall, its brass lock gleaming like a quiet warning. Do not open without the manager's key. The bold print on the white sign beneath it read, "Company property, unauthorized access prohibited," staring right back at him. Darius let his hand rest on the cool metal, a memory flashing last time. A little boy with a bleeding hand had waited 10 whole minutes just to get a bandage. He pulled his hand away, sighed lightly, and kept walking his patrol. Overhead, the PA system announced the store would be closing soon. A few employees smiled at each other, heading out early. Darius didn't know that in just a few minutes, every rule he'd ever followed would be pushed to the breaking point. A sharp, choking cough came from the produce section. Darius spun around. A young woman, Maya Patel, had just popped a sample of walnuts into her mouth. Now she was doubled over, clawing at her neck, skin flaring red along her throat and cheeks. Darius rushed over. "Do you have an EpiPen?" he asked urgently. Maya shook her head, breaths ragged and shallow. Manager Elaine Porter appeared, calm to the point of coldness. "I'll call for the unlock code," she said, lifting the store phone. The operator's voice crackled over the line, taking her through slow, deliberate security questions. Maya's breathing grew heavier. The tick-tock of the wall clock seemed to wedge itself between every pause. Darius glanced at the cabinet, still locked. Every passing second narrowed the space between life and death. The fluorescent light washed over Maya's now pale face. Elaine kept the phone to her ear, waiting for confirmation from the other end. Darius's grip tightened. A still moment, then he pulled the baton from his belt and raised it. The crack echoed through the room like a gavel strike. The lock split. Darius yanked open the cabinet, grabbed an Epi auto-injector, and dropped to one knee beside Maya. "Hang in there," he said, pressing the injector into her thigh. Within seconds, her breathing steadied. Her eyes widened, locking onto his. Around them, people stood frozen, stunned. From the corner, Elaine lowered the phone, her gaze a mix of shock and icy disapproval. Darius knew he had just saved a life and shattered a rule that could not be unbroken. Outside, an ambulance siren wailed into the parking lot, red and blue lights sweeping across the glass walls. 2 EMTs burst in, checking Maya's pulse and breathing. "She's stable, thanks to the quick injection," said Jenna Price, the blonde EMT, nodding at Darius. He returned a small nod, hands still trembling. Maya's family arrived, wrapping her in relieved hugs, tears of gratitude spilling over. The warmth of that moment filled the sterile store air. But from behind, a chill crept in. Elaine stood there, clipboard in hand, eyes locked on him. Not a single word of thanks. In the employee room, the fluorescent light glared down on a metal table. Elaine slid a paper in front of him. Incident report. Destruction of company property. Her voice was flat, reading like a legal clause. Darius stared at the bold letters, the warmth from moments earlier sinking to the bottom of his gut. He signed his name, the ink blurring slightly under his damp hand. Outside, the ambulance pulled away. Inside his head, a question took shape. Was a lock worth more than a life? The next morning, Darius sat at the end of a long conference table in a small, Brightmart meeting room. The wall clock ticked slow, deliberate beats. Thomas Griggs from HR flipped through a file. His tone measured property damage, overstepping authority, 280 in losses. "If I hadn't," Darius began. "You violated protocol," Thomas cut in, eyes never leaving the paperwork. Elaine sat across from him, arms folded, her face set like stone. At the end of the meeting, Thomas extended a hand. "Your badge and ID, please." Darius removed each piece, placing them on the table. The soft clink of metal sounded like a door closing behind him. In the hallway, a few coworkers stood near the coffee machine. No one spoke, only an averted glance, a quiet sigh. Outside, the sky was choked with gray clouds. Darius shoved his hands into his pockets, a hollow feeling settling into every step. In his mind, Maya's gasping face and Elaine's icy stare kept taking turns replaying two poles of the same story. That evening, the small West Side apartment glowed under the yellow light of an old desk lamp. His mother, Loretta Cole, sat at the kitchen table, teacup in hand. Stacks of bills, electric, water, rent lay in front of her. "Don't make this worse, Darius. You need that job," she said, her voice weary with both worry and love. Loretta had been a nurse. She knew the worth of seconds in a crisis, but also the price of crossing a giant corporation. Darius stayed silent, eyes fixed on a photo of his late father, a police officer, hanging on the wall. He could still hear his father's words, "Do what's right, even if no one claps." Now, doing right had pushed him to the edge of losing everything. The only sounds were the ticking wall clock and the wind slipping through the window frame. Loretta reached over, squeezing his hand, trying to pass along both her fear and her fragile hope. His phone buzzed on the table, a text from an unknown number. "I'm Jenna, the EMT from last night. We need to talk." The small cafe near the hospital smelled of fresh pastries. Darius stepped inside and spotted a blonde woman with her hair pulled back, wearing an EMT jacket. She stood and waved him over. "Jenna Price?" she said, shaking his hand firmly. "If it weren't for you, Maya wouldn't be here today." Darius shifted uncomfortably. "I just did what needed to be done." Jenna reached into her bag and placed a small USB drive on the table. "My body cam recorded everything the moment she collapsed, the second you broke the lock, and the moment she started breathing again. They can't deny this." He stared at the tiny piece of plastic and metal, feeling like he'd just been handed a key to unlock the truth. But he also knew using it would mean going head-to-head with the corporation. "They're not gonna like it," he said quietly. "And I'm not going to like staying silent," Jenna replied, her eyes unwavering. Outside, the crowd hurried under a gray sky. Inside, Darius felt a small flame spark. Not hope for getting his job back, but the feeling he wasn't alone anymore. 2 days later, the TV in Darius's living room lit up with Brightmart's logo. The company's spokesperson, dressed in a gray suit, spoke in slow, deliberate tones. "Customer safety is always our priority. However, destruction of property and overstepping authority are unacceptable actions." The screen cut to security footage, Darius raising his baton, the lock breaking. It froze there, no footage of Maya breathing again. Darius switched the TV off. Silence filled the room. His phone buzzed with a text from a coworker. "They're making you look reckless." Outside, wind slapped against the windows. He sat upright, as if posture alone could keep the anger from spilling over. In his head, Jenna's voice echoed, "They can't deny it, but clearly, they could twist it, and they already had." That afternoon, social media began to stir. A post from Maya's younger brother appeared, a photo of her smiling in a hospital bed, captioned, "He saved my sister's life. Give him justice." The hashtag LifeBeforeLocks caught fire. Each share came with stories from people who'd faced similar delays, locked first aid kits, slow procedures. Local news brought Maya's family on air. They spoke through tears about the moment she couldn't breathe and the security guard who broke protocol to save her. Petitions demanding Darius's reinstatement gained tens of thousands of signatures in under 24 hours. Articles started asking, should financial policy outweigh human life? Darius watched it all unfold on his phone. Every notification felt like another wave pushing against the corporation. But he also knew when public pressure rises, the counterattack comes fast. On a rainy afternoon, Darius sat in a small conference room at a downtown law office. Across from him sat two men in black suits, Brightmart's legal representatives. "We're prepared to offer you a generous settlement," one said, sliding a thick envelope toward him. "In exchange, you'll sign an agreement not to discuss the incident." Darius opened it, crisp bills, the ink smell still fresh. At that moment, his phone buzzed again. A text from Jenna. An internal email just leaked. They're putting all the blame on you. He looked up, locking eyes with the lawyer. They've already started rewriting the story, haven't they? Silence. Rain tapped steadily against the window, punctuating the truth. Taking the money meant silence. It meant letting them win. Darius closed the envelope and slid it back. No. The next day, the hospital's press room was packed with reporters. On the podium, Chief Medical Director Dr. Alvarez adjusted the mic. His voice was firm. Maya Patel suffered a severe anaphylactic reaction. Without epinephrine, within minutes, she would have died. The timely injection saved her life. Beside him, Jenna stepped forward, holding up the official medical report to the cameras. I was there. I saw it with my own eyes. Darius Cole's actions are the only reason Maya is alive today. Camera flashes fired, reporters scribbled notes, lenses turned toward the front row where Darius sat quietly. He didn't need to speak. The evidence spoke for him. Outside, LifeBeforeLocks roared back to life. The next morning, pale sunlight slipped through his blinds. Sitting at his laptop, Darius opened an email. Another NDA offer, this time double the money. The cursor hovered over reply. He remembered the siren's scream, Maya's cold hand before she revived, and his mother's worried eyes. He took a deep breath, typed, I don't sell the truth. He hit send, then shut the laptop. Outside, the city was waking. Inside, something had lifted from him lighter than the stack of bills he'd just turned down. Monday. Brightmart's main auditorium blazed under the glare of TV lights. The press rows were packed tight, the sound of rapid keystrokes mixing with camera shutters. On stage, the CEO stood in the center, Maya and Jenna to his right, Darius in a plain suit to his left. We apologize for the wrong decisions that were made, the CEO said into the microphone, each word carefully measured. The actions of Mr. Darius Cole saved a customer's life. We are officially reversing his termination and inviting him back. Applause filled the room, but Darius only gave a small nod. Flashbulbs strobed, freezing the moment he shook the CEO's hand. To many, it was a victory. But to Darius, it felt like only a brief pause on a much longer road. As they stepped off the stage, Maya hugged him tightly. You changed the way they see everything, she whispered. A week later, Brightmart live-streamed the announcement of its new first aid override policy, allowing employees to open first aid cabinets immediately in emergencies without waiting for a manager's approval. Training videos played alongside the announcement, showing how to recognize anaphylaxis, how to respond quickly. In the corner of the screen, the hashtag LifeBeforeLocks stood out like a reminder of why the change existed. Darius was invited to speak. He recounted every step from that night, not exaggerating, not blaming, just pressing one truth. Time is the one thing you can't get back. Sometimes it's the only thing that can save someone. Under the video, thousands of supportive comments poured in, but mixed among them were skeptics, questioning whether this was real change or just corporate PR. One quiet weekend afternoon, at another Brightmart location across town, 17-year-old cashier Nia was scanning groceries when a scream cut through the store from the candy aisle. A boy, maybe 8 years old, was clutching his throat, wheezing, face flushed, bright red. Nia instantly remembered Darius's training session. When you see these signs, don't wait for permission. She sprinted to the first aid cabinet, swiped her badge, and the lock popped open. Within seconds, she handed an inhaler to the boy's mother. The boy's breathing eased almost immediately. His mother broke into tears, hugging Nia over and over, her voice choked with thanks. Around them, coworkers stood frozen for a beat, then slowly began to clap. Across the city, Darius's phone buzzed with a message from Nia. I did it because of you. He stared at the screen and smiled quietly. Weeks later, the local community center was packed. Darius stood beside a table lined with first aid kits, speaking to a group of young volunteers about emergency response. In a small glass case on the corner of the table sat the shattered brass lock from that night. The plaque beneath it read, Priority Life. Darius never went back to working security. Instead, he started a free first aid training fund for the community, partnering with the hospital and local EMTs. When the session ended, he watched the young faces heading home carrying knowledge that might one day save a life. In his mind, the old question rose again, is a human life worth more than a lock? He didn't need to answer. The eyes of those he'd just trained said everything for him. If you believe a human life will always matter more than any rule, hit like, comment humanity to honor those who dare to cross the line of fear, and subscribe so we can keep alive the stories that remind the world what truly matters.